In the previous episode, Katherine sought Caroline's help and assisted her in investigating Maxfield's identity. In the end, they uncovered a mysterious organization, Augustine. Damon and Jeremy helped Silas find the mysterious anchor, which turned out to be Silas's long-lost lover, Amara. Katsia restored Stefan's memories as an act of revenge. Stefan, in retaliation, took Amara away from Silas. And Bonnie, to come back to life, became the new anchor. This episode picks up right where the last left off. Stefan personally buried Silas, but his pain didn't fade. Instead, it intensified, becoming even more unbearable with nowhere to place it. Since Katherine reverted from a vampire back to a human, her hair turned gray, her teeth fell out, and her body started to age rapidly. A beauty's decline dreads the mirror, for time is a woman's greatest enemy. Rather than withering away on her deathbed, Katherine would rather freeze herself at her youthful peak. So, she climbed to the top of the clock tower and leapt. The reason Katherine tried to commit suicide was because she had successfully made everyone abandon her. This morning, Katherine drank herself into a stupor at the bar. Matt, on the other hand, was deeply troubled. His body had been inhabited by a traveler's soul, a ticking time bomb ready to explode at any moment. As luck would have it, Katherine understood Czech and offered to help Matt translate the phone conversation under the condition that the drinks kept flowing. Katherine explained to Matt that travelers are a branch of witches, and they specialize in body possession.
You've got one inside of you. It's kind of like a human parasite that's hitching a ride in your brain.
Upon learning that the traveler inside Matt was Nadia's boyfriend, Gregor, Katherine, as Nadia's mother, felt it necessary to vet him. Meanwhile, Stefan, tormented by painful memories, developed psychological trauma. He often zoned out, haunted by flashbacks of drowning. Without realizing it, Stefan was drenched in sweat, his hands clawing at the couch. He decided to go to the bar to drink and ended up running into Katherine, where they confided in each other. Katherine's body was deteriorating by the day, her joints aching and her gums receding. Stefan had thought that killing Silas would soothe all the pain, but the anguish only surged even more violently. Katherine suggested that Stefan shift his focus, and as it so happened, she had something she needed his help with. Later, Katherine called Nadia over and confessed the truth about their relationship to Stefan. At Katherine's request, Nadia activated Gregor inside Matt's body. After taking control of the body, Gregor thought Nadia had betrayed him, but Stefan was there, so he didn't dare do anything. Katherine, in front of her daughter, intended to expose the hypocrisy of the travelers. She demanded to know from Gregor what their true motive for coming to the town was.
Track and kill Silas.
So it has absolutely nothing to do with this?
When Gregor saw the dagger in Katherine's hand, he could no longer remain calm. Katherine pressed the dagger against his throat, forcing Gregor to reveal the truth. After Silas's death, the travelers still aimed to eliminate all doppelgangers, including Katherine. Nadia was utterly shocked, realizing that her boyfriend had been using her all along to get to Katherine. Katherine stabbed Gregor with the dagger, but this was Matt's body. If something happened to Matt, Stefan wouldn't be able to explain it to Elena. Katherine explained that she was merely exorcising the traveler's soul.
It's the only thing that will truly kill a passenger.
Although Katherine had exposed the true nature of the travelers, Nadia didn't appreciate it. Katherine's intentions were good, but she never considered how others felt. Katherine only wanted to do something for her daughter before her own death, but in return, she was met with her daughter's growing distance. At this moment, she truly had nothing left, completely alone. So, Katherine left behind a letter, hoping Stefan would give it to her daughter Nadia after her death.
Dear Nadia, sorry I had to kill your boyfriend, but it was the motherly thing to do. Suicide, however, not very motherly of me.
Katherine climbed the clock tower in town and leapt.
Meet me on the other side.
Stefan is a kind person. If it had been Damon, he might have even spat on Katherine's corpse. Katherine didn't want to accept dying of old age. After all, she had lived long enough. Stefan strokes Katherine's cheek and says,
Katherine Pierce.
The trick ain't worth the time it buys. I'm sick of
Suck it up.
hearing.
Those brief words from Stefan reignited the light in Katherine's once dull eyes. bringing back that familiar cunning glint. The Dark Queen had returned. As for how to make vampires and humans coexist, Maxfield had figured it out. In 14 days, Maxfield turned a vampire into one that hunted other vampires. This more brutal, cannibalistic type of vampire was known as an Augustine vampire. At this moment, Jesse broke free from his restraints. Maxfield tried to initiate emergency measures, but Jesse stopped him first. Since the resurrection of the witch Bonnie, the college life of the three girls had begun. They were preparing to throw a party. Bonnie used the pretense of a registration form to sneak off for a rendezvous with Jeremy. At this moment, the ghost of an old woman appeared to Bonnie. As the mystical anchor, spirits must pass through Bonnie to enter the afterlife, and the process is extremely painful. Meanwhile, as Elena and Caroline were setting up the party, a call came in from the missing Jesse. Jesse's voice was filled with panic on the other end of the line, and he urged Caroline to come quickly. Just after Jesse hung up, his roommate Aaron returned to the dorm. Jesse, now ravenous, immediately attacked him, but luckily Caroline arrived in time to stop him. Caroline had used her own blood to heal Jesse, but she hadn't expected that Maxfield had killed him to complete the transformation. Jesse had been used by Maxfield for experiments, injected daily with strange blood. Given the situation, to prevent Jesse from harming anyone, Caroline called Elena to bring blood bags to quench Jesse's thirst. Under Caroline's guidance, Jesse not only learned how to save people, but also successfully compelled Aaron, erasing his memory. After discovering that Jesse hadn't drained Maxfield but merely knocked him out, Caroline and the others decided to proceed with their party and left the task of interrogating Maxfield to Damon. The lab was filled with various viruses, which Maxfield had been using to experiment on Jesse. Damon decided to take revenge on Maxfield by using the same methods against him. Maxfield had no choice but to confess his research. Jesse was a new kind of vampire. Vampires had always relied on human blood to survive, but how could the danger of vampires be eradicated at its source? Human blood could only temporarily satisfy Jesse. Once he tasted what he truly craved, he could never pull himself back from the edge. Meanwhile, at the party, Caroline, who had just gone through a breakup, accepted Jesse's advances. She had a good impression of him, and when they kissed, Jesse bit her. Jesse couldn't control his bloodlust. He used what little sanity he had left to distance himself from Caroline. Aaron also showed up at the party. In conversation, Elena learned about Aaron's tragic past. He was a cursed soul. After his parents died, every relative who took him in also died, with terrible bite marks on their necks. Elena furrowed her brow. All of Aaron's family and friends had been killed by vampires. In the end, it was Maxfield who took him in. Elena felt deep sympathy for Aaron and quickly notified Damon to keep Maxfield alive. Damon had intended to kill Maxfield. If Maxfield created more of these new vampires, it would spell disaster. But Damon's love for Elena changed his mind. Damon slit his own wrist, preparing to heal Maxfield with his blood. But just then, Jesse stormed in, furious, demanding to know what Maxfield had turned him into. How could he have wanted to eat the girl he liked? Jesse had already tasted vampire blood, and he was immediately drawn to the blood on Damon's wrist. Even though Jesse was out of control, Damon remained calm. A fledgling vampire like Jesse stood no chance against him. But Jesse's burst of strength far exceeded Damon's expectations. When Elena arrived, she saw Jesse tearing into Damon with the ferocity of a ripper. Elena had no choice but to stake Jesse through the heart. At the same time, Caroline's gasp came from behind. She had just taken things to the next level with Jesse, only to have her best friend end the budding romance with her own hands. Damon quickly defended Elena's actions. Once Jesse had tasted vampire blood, he would never stop. His instincts would drive him to hunt vampires. Damon told them to leave, that he would handle the cleanup. Later, Damon discovered numbered blood bags in the fridge, and some long-forgotten memories were suddenly brought back. Damon asked Maxfield who the person with the code 120144 was.
What do you care?
Because I was 21051.
21051, hang on. You were an Augustine vampire?
Vampire lab rats, coded subject names. Thought you guys shut down 60 years ago.
You thought wrong.
At that moment, Damon's killing intent toward Maxfield surged, but Maxfield had already freed himself from his restraints. He activated the emergency system when Damon wasn't looking. Damon was knocked out by the vaporized vervain.
I'm sure Augustine will be thrilled to have you back.
When Damon woke up, he found himself in a dark cell. The initials DS carved into the wall, his own name, brought back the terror of being under Augustine's control. In 1953, the vampire Damon had returned to his ancestral home at the invitation of his descendants. He never expected that his own bloodline would betray him. There was a group willing to pay a high price for vampires. Damon used his last ounce of strength to kill his treacherous descendants, saving the buyer a lot of money. This fills in the hole dug in the first season. The reason Damon killed his descendant Zach was that Zach's ancestors had once sold him out. The Augustine organization had used Damon for countless horrific experiments, and 60 years later, Damon once again fell into the clutches of Augustine, imprisoned in the very same dungeon as before. On the other side, Jesse's death left Aaron feeling deeply guilty. He believed he was cursed, a jinxed soul, and that anyone who got close to him would die. Elena felt immense sympathy for Aaron. With her comforting words, Aaron slowly began to recover. To Elena's surprise, she discovered Aaron's last name was Whitmore, and the university she attended, Whitmore College, was actually Aaron's family's property. Aaron, it turned out, was a very discreet billionaire. In a family photo at Aaron's home, Elena noticed her adoptive father. He had once been a core member of Augustine. At that moment, Maxfield appeared, praising Elena's adoptive father for his accomplishments, saying he was one of the best doctors the organization had ever seen. Before Elena could fully process this bombshell, Maxfield knocked her out with vervain. Aaron was both shocked and furious at this, and Maxfield had no choice but to reveal the vampire's secret. It turned out that Aaron's ancestors had been secretly studying vampires for generations.
Your family pioneered it. Your dad trained me in it.
When Elena awoke, she found that Damon was imprisoned there as well. Damon told Elena that Maxfield was conducting the traditional Augustine torture ritual on vampires. Damon had already endured this many years ago, and now, returning to the same place, with new doctors but the same old experiments, he was still the lab rat. After learning about Augustine's cruelty, Elena couldn't accept that the adoptive father she had once respected had also been part of it. Elena was deeply curious about how Damon had escaped back then. Damon recalled the past, the first time he was captured, and how he met a vampire named Enzo. Enzo had been a soldier during World War II. After revealing his vampire identity, Augustine had captured him for experimentation. He had been tortured for 10 long years. Damon's arrival shared half of Enzo's suffering. The two men, bound by the same fate, quickly became close friends. Enzo was fiercely loyal and often looked out for Damon.
21051.
I take that as an insult.
Far more energetic than my neighbor here. Can't believe you didn't notice.
No return then.
Enzo once took Damon's place on the operating table, and the agonized screams that followed filled Damon with overwhelming guilt. This was a part of his life that Damon had never told anyone about, not even Stefan. Augustine was an elite organization that only the powerful could join. They used vampire blood to extend their lives and free themselves from illness. Every New Year's Eve, Augustine would hold a gathering where all the members could receive a cup of vampire blood. Damon and Enzo were locked in cages while the doctors would demonstrate the miraculous properties of vampire blood to the attendees, how it could heal wounds and bring the dead back to life. The wealthy would applaud in delight. Damon's arrival accelerated Enzo's escape plan. The blood they were given daily was just enough to keep them alive, but not enough to restore their strength.
If one vampire were to drink 2 rations every day for the next year, he'd be able to build up his strength. So by the time New Year's Eve comes around again, that one vampire will be ready to fight.
This meant that one of them would have to go an entire year starving. They played rock, paper, scissors, and in the end, Damon won. Although Enzo was reluctant, he still gave his life to Damon. And so, Enzo starved for a year, while Damon steadily gathered his strength. Finally, New Year's Eve arrived. As per tradition, the elites were about to drink a glass of vampire blood to celebrate the new year. When Damon was brought out of his cage, he snapped his thumb to slip off the shackles, and before the doctor could react, Damon crushed his skull. The elites fled in panic, knocking over candles as they ran, while Damon hunted them down one by one, feeding on their blood. Enzo, still locked in his cage, watched with excitement. As the fire began to spread, Damon rushed to free Enzo, but the cage was coated with vervain, and he couldn't open it. The flames grew larger, and Damon's eyes began to show hesitation.
And I knew if I was going to save myself, I'd stop caring about Enzo. So I turned off my emotions.
Enzo begged Damon not to give up, but Damon didn't dare to look at him directly. With his humanity switched off, Damon walked away without hesitation, never looking back. Behind him, Enzo screamed Damon's name in anger and despair. The physical torment of 10 years paled in comparison to the pain of this betrayal. This is the past that Damon most does not want to recall. He abandoned a friend who truly treated him well. Meanwhile, Aaron finally learned the truth from Maxfield about why he believed he was cursed. His family and friends had all died at the hands of vampires. Enraged, Aaron stormed into the dungeon. Since he didn't know Damon, he assumed Elena was the killer. Why else would she have deliberately gotten close to him?
That was all me.
It turned out that Damon and Enzo had once devised a cruel revenge plan. After Enzo's death, Damon carried it out alone. The Augustine organization was founded by the Whitmore family, and Damon had killed every member of this family, leaving only one heir each time. When that heir grew older and the family tree branched out, Damon would return and wipe them out again, leaving one to continue the bloodline. Damon was the reason Aaron had become cursed, the source of his tragedy. Vampires live forever, and Damon's revenge had lasted for 60 years. Furious, Aaron shot Damon in the head. When Damon woke up, he found Elena was gone. She must have been taken to the lab to experience the same torment Damon had endured all those years ago. In the lab, a soft hum woke Elena. The voice belonged to another prisoner, but unlike Elena's tense state, this person seemed oddly at ease, entertaining himself.
I'm 12144. My name's Enzo.
Elena was shocked beyond words. Enzo was still alive. Had he been enduring this inhuman torture for 60 years? Just how strong was this man? Enzo continued to hum as if to say, "Have you ever experienced true despair? I am despair itself." Meanwhile, Katherine and Stefan had rekindled their old flame. At the last second, when Katherine had attempted suicide, Stefan had swooped in like a hero to save her. To prevent Katherine from trying again, Stefan kept her close, instructing her to keep a journal to record the good things in life. Katherine, however, scribbled furiously, filling the pages with complaints. In Katherine's view, Stefan wasn't doing much better than she was. After being trapped at the bottom of a lake and drowning over and over, he had developed severe claustrophobia. Instead of helping others, she thought, Stefan should help himself first. As they spoke, Katherine's reinforcements arrived. Stefan opened the door only to find it was Caroline. She had brought the safe that Stefan had once been imprisoned in. Stefan had been locked inside that safe for 3 months. Caroline's method of therapy was to fight fire with fire. As Stefan lay inside the safe, the narrow, dark space made him break out in a sweat. Caroline flipped through a textbook, trying to apply what she'd just learned. Suddenly, Katherine's interest was piqued by gossip. She suspected that there was something more than friendship between Caroline and Stefan. A woman's intuition, it seemed, was always terrifyingly accurate. As they bickered, they completely forgot about Stefan, still trapped inside the safe. The painful memories rushed back to him like a tidal wave, and Stefan began to suffocate. In the end, he passed out, having held his breath for too long. Katherine thought Caroline's approach wasn't intense enough, so she suggested a more extreme form of therapy. When Stefan came to, a voice whispered in his ear,
Let me out of here!
This time, Stefan was truly panicked. He feared that in his heightened state of stress, he might rip Katherine to shreds. But Katherine laughed it off, saying, I'm risking my life to help you. Either you overcome your trauma and we get out of here together, or you kill me. The words Stefan had once used to encourage Katherine were now thrown back at him, word for word.
You're Stefan Salvatore. Suck it up.
All that could be heard inside the safe was Stefan's labored breathing. Caroline was worried for Katherine. Stefan, drenched in sweat and struggling to breathe, felt as though he was going to die. At that moment, Katherine decided to intensify the pain by bringing up Stefan's past wounds. She taunted him about Elena's shifting affections, using it to provoke him. Stefan grabbed Katherine by the throat, threatening to kill her. But Katherine ripped away Stefan's facade, pointing out that his trauma wasn't really caused by the safe. It was that he refused to face the truth of Elena falling in love with Damon. Stefan had been using physical pain to dull the emotional agony of losing Elena.
Are you going to feed me? Or are you going to save my life? Fight it, Stefan. Fight it.
Gradually, Stefan began to calm down. Katherine gently stroked his face and leaned in for a kiss. At that moment, the safe was opened, and Caroline ruined Katherine's good moment. As Stefan stepped out of the safe, his entire demeanor changed. The darkness and tension had disappeared from his face. Both Caroline and Katherine had helped Stefan overcome his psychological trauma. Caroline didn't notice the intense, suggestive looks between Stefan and Katherine. Later, they went upstairs to talk, leaving Caroline alone in the living room. Stefan admitted what Katherine had said, which meant that he had completely given up on his fantasy of Elena. Katherine moved closer, gently running her hand across Stefan's chest. Their eyes locked, and in the heat of the moment, their passion reignited. It was inevitable. They had rekindled their old flame.
Oh my God.